Welcome to the Bridge of Truth. My special guest this evening is Sheikha Maryam Kabeer Faye. Sheikha Maryam was one of the first guests on my produced shows, and that was a few years ago. And at the time, the subject of terrorism was prescient in regards its being associated with Islam. And over the past few years, it seems that that issue has been drawn more and more into the media's attention. I felt it would be a significant thing to have Sheikha Maryam come on now for a live show to be able to address this issue, and then also to be able to talk about her spiritual journey in general. So Sheikha Maryam, welcome to the Bridge of Truth. Thank you so much for making the trip up here to be a part of our program.
Thank you very much for inviting.
Now, I know you've prepared something. This is a live show, and we'll be opening up the chat line. But I'd like you to read what you have prepared first before we get into viewers' questions.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitan nirrajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahmanir Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in, Ihdina siratal mustaqim, siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim, غير المكتوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. May peace and blessing spread throughout the world, touching and transforming the hearts and lives of all sincere seekers on the journey to our exalted source. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I would like to begin with some beautiful passages from the Holy Quran and my understandings of these words of revelation, which directly address the important question that you have posed. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ar-Rahman, Allamal Quran, Halakal Insan, Allamahul Bayan, Ash-Shamsu wal Kamaru bihusban, wa Najmu wa Shajaru yasjudan, wa Sama'a rafa'aha wa wadal mizan. Allah taraw fil mizan, wal akimul wazna bil kisti, wala tuksirul mizan. The Merciful. It is He who has taught the Quran. He created insan, mankind. He taught him or mankind speech and intelligence. The sun and the moon follow courses exactly computed, and the herbs and trees both alike bow in adoration. And the firmament has He raised high, and He has set up the balance in order that you may not transgress due balance, so establish weight with justice and fall not short in the balance. Blessed is the name of the Lord, full of majesty, beauty, and honor. In this beautiful surah, named the Merciful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us how His mercy is made manifest in the balance of the cosmos, the balance of nature, the sun and the moon, the herbs and the trees which bow down, the firmament raised high. All are the manifestations of Allah's merciful, just, and balanced rule. All this and the speech and intelligence is imparted to mankind, enabling us to proclaim and comprehend. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this as manifestations of His mercy. And the first of the merciful gifts given is that which contains all the mercy, Alam al-Quran. It is He who taught the Quran, the Holy Quran, in which every surah except one begins with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate. This in itself is a very important sign for humanity. Thus does the Lord of all prioritize these of His attributes, because this is clearly the way in which He wishes us most often to remember Him. In light of the emphasis given by Him to these of His qualities, how can then we, who intend to serve and worship the One most merciful, manifest in His name other than mercy, compassion, kindness, and love, albeit love that is united with justice and kindness founded upon knowledge, justice, and rectitude? We must deeply question then, who are they serving who terrorize and kill, oppress themselves and others, so to speak, in the name of Allah, that people, whether they may be committing such acts in the name of Allah, this is both a denial of the truth of Islam and a sign of how far the creation has strayed away from the balance, the justice, and the fitra, which is the natural state ordained by the merciful. Every day on the news, we see a manifestation of this distortion and denial of divinely inspired reality, the haqq. The condition of humanity today is a deeply complex distortion because justice, harmony, and balance all seem to be deeply strained and compromised by various conditions prevailing in the world. But this apparent imbalance, stress and distress, is a call to all of us who are believers to return to the balance created by our Lord and manifest the mercy and compassion as He intended for us, just as He ordained it for Himself. So, when having revealed this to us, this surah, in which the bounty of the realms that He has created for us to abide within are revealed, and in which we come to know, worship, and serve Him, proclaiming His praise, He asks us, and which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? One of the favors that, unless we have totally become disconnected ourselves from the divine balance, we cannot deny, is the gift of His mercy, Ar-Rahman. And if we are existing in a state of harmony with the flow of His mercy, then we will not deny any of the favors that He is bestowing upon us in the plenitude of His love. And that is how I want to begin. It's to invoke the One most merciful who created us as a manifestation of His love and mercy. And to realize that if He showed us that every single chapter of Quran begins in the name of the merciful and the compassionate, this is a very clear sign that Islam is a manifestation of mercy and must be a manifestation of His mercy. And that the actions of people who are so-called terrorists, who then commit acts of blind cruelty and insensitive, horrendous, killing of innocent beings, it would appear to us in our deepest, innermost being that this is a denial of the one most merciful. So we turn to the mercy in order to discover how to discuss it and how to invoke it and how to live in accordance with it.
I know that your path is Sufi, and it is known to be a path of peace. Is your interpretation any different than perhaps those that might have seen something else in the Quran?
In the very beginning of the Quran, Allah tells us that this is a revelation without doubt for those who have taqwa. And I would like to begin by sharing my understanding of what taqwa is. Sometimes it's translated as fear of God, but it's also translated as wonder and awareness, consciousness, and awe.
It's interesting because the Bible also has the concept of fear of God, which is actually supposed to be interpreted in the way that you described as well.
And what the Sufis have transmitted to me, my shuyukh, my masters on the journey, is that what makes us understand what the Quran is really saying is that state of consciousness. It is that state of awe, respect, wonder, love, worship that enables us to understand the Quran in the sense of its mercy, in the sense of the light contained within it. And I believe that it is possible to read it in a different way if you're not in that, if you don't have that state of consciousness.
Gotcha.
And so, rather than judge anyone, since only Allah is the judge of all, we ask Him to awaken within us and others that state of consciousness that makes us know that the one most merciful, loving, most luminous, most just is in fact revealing His letter of love to us, His messages to us, in order to bring us on the journey that leads directly to Him. And I wanted to mention that your show is called The Bridge of Truth, which I love, and I feel honored to be present in an assembly which is dedicated to this passage, to this journey. And in Arabic, I believe we refer to it as Sirat al-Mustaqim, the path, the straight path. And we explain it as being that path which comes directly from the divine exalted source and leads as directly as possible back to that source in the way that He most desires us to travel. And so when I see at the very beginning, after the Fatiha, which I began with, that one of the first passages of Quran is telling us about this state of taqwa. It is addressed to the muttaqin, the people who are in the state of this awareness. It explains then that when we are in this state, it's not only when we're reading Quran, but in every stage of our life, when we realize that God actually is with us, that He sees everything that we're doing, that we are then whatever anyone else thinks we're doing, it's really God who knows what we're doing. He knows what we're thinking. And He is inspiring us to rise up and be worthy of the presence that we are in. In other words, understanding that the one most holy who created us all with a divine purpose is actually conscious of every single thing that we're doing. We want to do better. We want to do the very best that we can as human beings on this earth and in all that we go to when we leave this world.
So the idea then is to read the holy text, and I would say that this is true for any religion, more and more to try to increase enlightenment and develop a clearer perspective of what the teachings are saying.
And Quran also tells us He leads to His light whom He wills. So part of the process of studying, reading, and worshiping, loving, and then asking for the clearest guidance that we can receive is in fact being guided. That in order to understand what He wishes us to do, we beseech His guidance. That is, that He makes us understand exactly why we were created and how we can then read the text in order to fulfill the purpose for which He created us. That how we can go deeper and deeper into each passage, humbly. We don't come as scholars and academics telling other people what to believe. We beseech the guidance of the one who sent the revelation, and the one he sent the revelation through, his holy prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace and blessings be upon him and all the messengers. And we walk humbly behind these exalted beings and ask for that wisdom which they manifested to be awakened within us, so that we can see with wisdom what this is all about, and read, with illuminated understanding, and then practice it. We have to put it into action. In other words, to talk about mercy is one thing. To receive it is another. To manifest it is the completion. So I think that when we have programs like this, the purpose is to send out waves of light and grace and prayer into the universe, messages of light from the source through those who truly worship and love him, so that those sincere seekers, wherever they may be, can begin to hear that sound, to hear that resonance, to feel the resonance, and then to be transformed by it. And this is certainly what happened to me in my journey. And it was by meeting beings of light who were, totally surrendered, or at least deeply surrendered to the one of infinite mercy and compassion, that I learned about what mercy and compassion are, and also what Islam is for the followers of the light of God. And then we say that again. It is possible to read the Quran in different ways. So we continuously go back to the understanding, passage by passage, of what he said, that is what the one of infinite grace has revealed to us, and how can we make that manifest in our own lives.
Yeah, because obviously you can't fight darkness with darkness. So individuals like yourself and the communities that you work with and all the others around the world that believe as you do, you're trying to bring more light to them so that hopefully they will begin to see the error of following perhaps a negative path.
And I don't think that I'm actually directing the message to anyone specific.
Right.
It's really God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, leads to his light whom he will. And it is our sincere intention to be instruments of that process of illumination. And that light will go where it goes, because it's he who's making this happen. It's his will that is manifesting this. We are very, very grateful receivers and transmitters of whatever he wills to express through us.
Now, I want our viewers to know, because they might be asking why you would feel that you would be qualified to address these issues. You are a Sheikha, and I know that is a special title, and it is sort of a qualification of scholarship in the teachings, and perhaps you can explain that just a little bit before we move on.
A sheikh or sheikha, in the sense that we are describing it, is a person who has been given permission to teach.
Okay.
And along with that is the duty to serve, the duty to love, the duty to give, the duty to feed. And I, in my journey from Hollywood, California, around the world many, many times, was guided on a very blessed and amazing journey to wonderful, great sheikhs, shuyukh, as well as other teachers who were all manifesting that purity of pure teaching, of teaching for the sake of God. So we say in Islam, according to the training that I have received, that whatever we do for this is for the sake of God. So when we marry, it's for the sake of God. When we study, it is for the sake of understanding what God wants us to know. When we give of the knowledge we have received, it is for the sake of serving the one infinitely merciful, compassionate, and wise in the way that he wishes that knowledge to go to whom he wills. So it is never a question of my saying that I am, I have the credentials because I received this degree from this university. I didn't receive any degree from university. I received training from illuminated people. Okay. And that light was then imparted into many dimensions of my being. The Sufi path, which is the really deep experience of Islam, according to my, knowledge, it's not separated at all from the true deen, but it's a way of going through a process in which your body, your mind, your heart, and your soul are being transformed continuously by imbibing the light of the Quran, by living with it, by making retreats, which I have made many. I've spent a lot of time guided into the interior dimensions, and then like drinking that water of life from the Quran and being just recreated in that light, being transformed into that living resonance. And so that is a part of any real tariqah, and I have been trained in this, especially by my present Sheikh Harun Rashid Faye al-Fakir, who is very, very knowledgeable of these arts of transformation according to the path of Islam.
And then it's a title that you earned then through your...
It was he has a grasp on a very profound level of who is coming into his presence and what each soul is seeking and what each person is capable of both receiving and giving. And then we spend a lot of time being guided internally to as I said, by the light of the Quran and by the Sufi practices, which include a great deal of remembrance of God, which takes different forms and takes different parts of the Quran and makes them at different parts of the revelation of God and brings them actually to life within us. So a person who becomes a sheikh or sheikha has to go through doorways, pass through many, many doorways.
And it's a tremendous level of commitment. I mean, you are literally committing yourself to do exactly what you're doing on my show and everywhere else that you go.
Yes. As God has ordained. And it's not something that I chose. It's not something that I even read about. Although when I was very young, messages started coming to me definitively, and I can tell you about that. And then as I grew older, I used to read the books of people who used to go on journeys. I was always fascinated with the student who went out on an amazing journey in search of the master. And that was just pre-learning for me. Actually, God was revealing that message to me through those pages that said, yes, indeed, there is a journey to make for any sincere seeker. And as much as it was real for me, it's real for everyone else. And that is one of the reasons that we are presenting the program, is to say that what we see being projected in the world today is mostly deception and falsehood. And it looks dim and dark and not inspiring and not hopeful. And that's because it's an illusion. And what the media is projecting is illusory, based upon the fact that there are very few people who have actually received this transformative knowledge and gone all the way through the journey. And what we want is for people in the media and people who are projecting out messages out into the world to become more and more enlightened and to send out that message of light, which will dispel the darkness of what is very often being projected on the movies and also especially the television screens.
Yeah, I think we have to be really discerning about the media that we choose to watch simply because they have their own agendas oftentimes. I've gotten two great comments from Isa. He notes, the interaction of the Prophet seen within Islam can be seen as a bridge to other traditions. And he also wants you to explain what a tariqah is.
Tariqah.
Tariqah.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, let's go back to the prophets themselves. The peace and blessings be upon them. That from the beginning until the end, there was one community of prophets and messengers, according to our understanding.
Okay.
So we make no divisions between them. In the context of Islam, we make no divisions. It says we accept them all. That means there's one source, one exalted divine source who has been sending, I call it a love letter to humanity. It involves both very good news and warnings. And everyone who came, every messenger and prophet that came from God essentially brought that message to different groups of humanity at different times. And it does appear from what we know of history, which is very little, because it's very difficult to get an absolutely firm report, a solid report. But what we understand is that very often the prophets and messengers, peace and blessings be upon them, were only received by a small group of humanity. But in fact, the message was denied by many, and it still is. Mm-hmm. Even in the name of the prophets, often the message is being denied. So now, but if we understand that what the prophets brought is all unified, then in fact, that's the bridge that goes between all peoples, and we can call it the bridge to truth.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
It's the Sirat al-Mustaqim. It goes from throughout all of existence. It is what we call the haqq, the truth. It's the truth. Now, do we know how to access the truth? Now, what we see in the name of what's been going on in religion throughout the ages, and Isa and I studied a great deal about this, including the history of Jerusalem itself. It was a bloodbath between people of different groups.
Exactly.
And I would say that we have to understand
all different faiths, not just in the Western paths.
This is the opposite of what we are seeking. And I think that most of the people watching this program are more like us, and we seek a bridge to truth which leads us to the one of infinite light, grace, and mercy. So when we see that there is one after another bloody war taking place, we have to take a step back from that scenario and ask for deeper guidance. What is this all about? And so Isa asked us, the interaction of the prophets seen within Islam can be seen as a bridge to other traditions. And what we want to understand is that all of these traditions, wherever a true messenger of God was manifesting the message of God, that will be directly linked to every other message that was given by one who brought that message. Now, what we need to do is find out within our hearts, souls, minds, wisdom, within the repository of wisdom within us, what did they really say? We see, for example, in the example of Christianity, that what we understand is that what Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, brought, what he manifested on earth, is quite different than what was said about him after that. You know, this is a possible understanding that we have come to have, because my son was studying the history of religion and I studied with him. And in any case, we stay focused now on how the messengers themselves lived, not how they were necessarily interpreted by many others. Now, he said, what is a tariqah? And I would like to explain that. I am now a Sheikha in the Mustafawiya Tariqah, which was transmitted to me by Sheikh Harun Faye al-Fakir, which came to him from his Sheikh Mustafa, and was actually, this Tariqah was placed in the hand, that means in the loving transmission, the careful, pure transmission of Sheikh Mustafa from the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that it was something ordained by God to be a community of worshipers who are dedicated, deeply committed, as you said, to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the deen, into the traditions of Islam, into the sunnah of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, how the Prophet lived, what he said, and what the Quran really is manifesting as reality, that we as a member of this community will then not only go as deep as we possibly can into the sources of the holy tradition, but then we will learn how to manifest that word by word in our life. So if we are actually told to give out of what God has given to us, we must do it. If we're told to be merciful to the creation so that God, most merciful, will shed mercy upon you, we do it. And the traditions of the Prophet are filled with these messages. I had written them down, but I am just going to speak about them
Yeah,
now.
I appreciate that.
And so when we're told that you should be hospitable to the guest, we have to do it. When we're told we have to protect the rights of the orphan, we have to manifest that love and care as the Holy Prophet did. This is true of anyone who follows in the footsteps of a prophet. So when you see how your understanding of how a prophet actually lived, though you can't, nobody knows for sure, but we believe that they walked very gently on the earth, that they served humanity without having an agenda of fame, fortune, and power to gain out of it. They came to serve humanity for the sake of bringing humanity to the light of God,
I mean,
to the path of God.
Usually a great personal sacrifice.
A great personal sacrifice. And so we are now committed to living a life like that. And that includes many, many hours that they spent in solitude. So we see in the example of Musa, alayhi salatu wasalam, Moses, and in the example of Isa, alayhi salatu wasalam, Jesus, and in the example of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, we see that they all spent a great deal of time in solitude with God. Therefore, if we want to follow them, we have to do that too. Then we see that he came out and transformed the loaves. You know, he transformed the food. What food they had was expanded for them. What food they had was expanded for them, was made to be abundant for them. The dead were brought back to life. We can't do that physically. We may be able to do that spiritually. But first we must come back to life ourselves. We can only transmit that life-giving secret if we have experienced it ourselves. And that is the reason that I was guided to living masters, to shuyukh, to transmitters of this living truth, because I needed to be trained and to be transformed, to go from one state of consciousness, let's say the state of watching the television and being filled with fear because they say this is breaking down now and then the other thing is breaking down. Okay, the banks are falling apart and now we have the nature is falling apart. And so often we see signs of this continuously manifesting in the world we live in right now. So in the Quran it says, in this very surah that I read, it says, everything perishes but the face of your Lord. Now, when we understand what that means, it means that God alone is eternal.
Right, exactly.
All right. If we worship the one who is eternal, if we stay focused on the eternal one, we give our lives to the eternal one. We know that he's watching us. We feel the presence of God, in ourselves. Why are we able to breathe but for that? People deny the existence of God and they keep breathing. Their heart keeps beating. So I say before that moment when death comes and we can no longer breathe, we have to pay attention. And the Quran tells us, behold the signs of God within the horizons and in yourself. So we look and see, you can even see on television, when you see these signs manifesting one after the next, you say, oh, this is a lesson to us. And God has explained this to us. If you read any of the scriptures, you see it happened before to civilizations that are not following divine clarity. They're not following the beautiful truths that God is giving to mankind. So we say, well, we can learn from these signs of even destruction that we should, 1, worship the eternal, 2, seek to know what he's telling us to do, 3, do that. Do that. Now, as we do that on a daily basis, the more we focus on that eternal beauty, that eternal grace, the light of God, the wisdom. As you said, read the Quran and read it in Arabic if you can, and then breathe in what the meaning of it is, not just read it all in one sitting, but make it alive for yourself. Let it become alive within you. Now, as we do that, we are actually focusing on the eternal and feeling the eternal much more than the temporary world, which is going through stages of a destruction. It's not really progressing in a very healthy way. But it doesn't mean that we can't. Now, as you see the earth shaking periodically, our question is, should we shake with it? Or should we establish stability in another dimension of consciousness? And that's what the Sufi path is teaching us within the context of the revelation of the Quran, within the context of the Sunnah of the Prophet, and within the context of Sufi tariqas that are dedicated to transforming lives. Not a little bit, but consistently and continuously. So that when you, for example, I will go inside and spend several days, in a retreat and feel the air of the divine like descending on me, and, understand deeply what is being revealed to me to the best of my ability. At each time I go in, I see something different. I understand more deeply what God had already revealed, but now I'm in a different state. Now, when the time is up, it's often, in our case, we have 3 nights and 2 days. When the time is that's just one kind of, system of retreat. Okay. Otherwise, it can be 40 days. It can be 7 months. There are many different levels of practice. Whenever the retreat is over, and during time of retreat, I don't see anyone. The door is closed. Only God. I can only turn to that face. When the time is up, I will open the door and go out. And very soon after, I will be driving to the prison and going to see my students. And trying to see how can I impart to my students in prison what I saw in the innermost realms of my retreat, or the children that I work with. Go and listen to them, and then try to share with them whatever we have received of the mercy, whatever we've received of the wisdom. It has to be shared. So that's why the word that we focus on a lot is called ibadah. And God said to us in the Quran, I did not create man and jinn except to worship me this is the word ibadah. And ibadah means worship, serve, love. So you worship, the worship and the service are intermingled with the love of God. And so you don't, someone asked me, what is the difference between, let's say, a Buddhist retreat and Sufi retreat, or what I'm speaking about. Mm-hmm. And I did experience some very deep things in Buddhism in my earlier days. But one of the things that I learned about was about people who made very deep retreats for many years. Sometimes people go in that tradition, or others, into retreat for very many years, or 4 years or whatever. And I lived in a Russian Orthodox monastery that was very profound before I became a Muslim, but on my journey to God. And I met a very, very deep person there, several incredible teachers there. And one of them was a beautiful father named Father Gabriel. And just an exalted, wonderful person who taught me many things. And I left the monastery, and then at a later date, I came back. And I asked where he was, and they said he's gone into permanent retreat. That means he disappeared from this world. I'm not the judge of that, but that is the story, and I'm sorry about it. I wish I could talk to him again, but I'm blessed that I met the man while he was in this realm communicating. So what I have learned in the Sufi path through the Shuyukh is that whatever we learn in our innermost realms, we will then manifest in the world. It's not a path of, there's no monkhood. In other words, you don't withdraw forever from the world. You go in, you breathe in, and then you breathe out. And so that is one reason that I speak to the media, that I'm not, even as a woman in Islam, at all, hidden away in a room where no one can see me. I'm not, my face is not covered, because whatever love that God is continuously imparting to me, it doesn't belong to me. It's not for one person. It's not for any person. It's for everyone. It's a path that's why we are told with very deep significance that when Allah says to the Holy Prophet, I sent you not but as mercy for all the worlds. Now, understanding that, we have to open up the doors of communication, open up our hearts to the lives of all beings, care and share. We're not isolated and, celebrating our high position. I cannot estimate who I am separate from anyone else. My life and all that has been given to me is to be imparted to those who are seeking that knowledge.
Now, you happen to mention an experience of being with the Buddhists. I know your journey began at the age of 12, and you began in an agnostic Jewish family.
Right.
How did you go from there to wanting to pursue Islam?
When I was a very small childlike baby in the cradle or the crib, my mother noticed that I was in a state of extreme joy. So that's where it begins, and we're told that everyone is born as a Muslim, which means in submission to the one infinite source, and now when you look at babies, very often you can see that. You see that light in them. It's just that we don't remember how we felt before we started getting all this conditioning. But when I did the reflection upon my life, which I needed to do as I was writing the book and actually just assimilating all these, trying to celebrate all the gifts that had been bestowed upon me, I did remember that. I have remembered the earliest years and the feeling of it's almost like rays descending upon you when you're lying in the cradle or the crib. I don't know if you remember that, and some people may remember, some people may not. But it's when you see a very happy baby, you know what it's like, and usually you feel connected to that because you were like that somewhere in your journey. And then I was around 5 years old. I was in Hollywood. Began getting training as an actress at 5.
Amazing.
And I was trained by some very great teachers who are well known in Hollywood now. And the reason that I was an actress is because I was overflowing with energy. I had to do something with it. And so I began by painting, sculpting, writing, and then acting. And I encourage creative people like this to express your feelings, because I know that all of this creative energy is what really led me on the path to God. It was the love of God that was making me feel so inspired. Nothing else. It wasn't a love of paint or clay or Hollywood. It's just that there was something happening that made me have to live life to its fullest at a very early age. Somebody was speaking to my wonderful stepmother, Sophie, recently when we were exploring the possibility of making a movie. And she said, "What do you think about what happened to your stepdaughter all these years later?" She said, "I met her when she was 7. She was always like this." So this is not a message about my life. It's about everybody's life. Somewhere in your early days of your journey, you started getting messages from the source of love, from the source of light. And however, there are other messages that come from the world that tend to put down that awareness, to oppress you, maybe at a very early age. So you become traumatized by things that are not enabling you to stay in touch with this inspiration, let's call it. So I was inspired at an early age to express myself. And then at the age of 12, I was acting in a theater company. I was just guided. There was open auditions, and I went to them. And they said, "Of course, welcome here." So I also want to encourage people, including my son who's interested in exploring these options, to go out and see what can you do with your life. How can you express yourself in the most positive way? So that was a very positive way for me. And I started playing many, many roles in the theater. And that point of value in it was when I looked out at the audience, I felt that they were all integrally connected with me, and that I had something to say to them, and they were listening. And it ennobled me, it empowered me to be a person who gives and receives and shares. So I was in the middle of this process of sharing myself with others when the assistant director, his name was Bill Behringer, and I've never been able to find him again unless he happens to watch this. He placed in my hand a scroll. The scroll started unfurling almost mystically, and I saw in it an ancient man with a staff and lantern, and he had a long purple robe, and he was walking in mountains. And it said, seek, and the truth shall make you free. So I encourage everyone to remember those messages that we receive, because that was the first absolutely clear message that I received about what I had to do with my life. And from that moment on, I was committed to it. I knew that was what I had to do. I did grow up in an agnostic home. That means nobody was really talking about God. Nobody quite even knew what was God. And the word God was like diminished in its aspect by the way that people were talking about it, in various contexts. So I was in a very free atmosphere to find out the truth for myself, and that's exactly what my parents told me. They said, we found what's true for us, you find what's true for you. And what they transmitted was a love of humanity. They're very non-biased, they were very non-racist, and they gave me all that, which I greatly appreciated. But there was something happening in me that was the divine, and nobody was talking about it. And when I would go to a church or a synagogue to try to find out, was it there? And I didn't feel the vibration there that I was feeling inside. So I kept searching. Now, when I saw this ancient man, that made me feel very hopeful that there was something I could do to find out. It still wasn't crystallized in me that I was looking for a religion, definitely not, nor that I even knew what I was looking for, but it said, go on a journey and seek. And then I went to Berkeley, eventually at a very young age. I skipped several grades and just got on with it. And then I started, it was the 60s in Berkeley, and all those messages were coming in about the different paths that were open to humankind. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I did practice these different things. I did a lot of meditation, studied with a great Zen master, Suzuki Roshi, and other paths of yoga and so on. And then I started reading the Sufis, and I was reading the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita also. So I was just studying and studying. And we also had a theater company, which was very interesting and inspiring. And we served humanity, and we found out more about ourselves. And eventually I just entered into like a deep retreat, because all of this energy had come in and I didn't know where it was leading me. But in reality, and then in that period of time, I dreamt of 7 ancient men surrounding me and blowing upon me, inspiring my soul. And in fact, I then was guided to meet them. I don't know exactly how many, but I was definitively guided to meet the
Were
spiritual
there
masters.
identities revealed to you?
No, not at that time. But what was revealed was that I was encircled, that I was being uplifted, that my journey was leading into a divine assembly, that I had to make the journey. We had spent a really enlightening time in Berkeley. I was practicing in the Floating Lotus Magic Opera Company as an actress and a cook, and serving the community with Abdul Hai Moore and others who ended up becoming really devout Sufi Muslims. And so we spent a beautiful time, rites of passage, and then I went inside. I had to go deeply within, and I lived in a glass room where all of the lights were surrounding it. There were just lights surrounding the room where I lived, and I prayed a great deal, in the way that I could. I also had a cabin. I did retreats. I did a lot of fasting, but I didn't know what I was, I was being guided by the one within more than anyone else. I met different teachers, including Ram Dass, and we communicated, and he kind of inspired me to go to India, which I did. And then I just got on a train, basically. I went to Europe, and then I got on the Orient Express. I stayed with some wonderful people in Cologne, Germany. and then just got on the Orient Express. And as I got on the train, I realized I had no longer any control over my life. And that was actually the bottom line truth. And as I was leaving America, I left behind. I made a book of all the dreams that I'd had. I gave it to people who were close to me, my family and friends. And I never knew if I would come back. Based upon the stories of the Buddha and others who made this journey, Rumi, the Sufis, you go out on a journey, you do not know where you're going or where it leads, where the path actually leads. But the path was so powerful that I had no doubt about it. I had no doubt that I had to make this journey. And in this earlier period, before I met my teachers, the deepest sense was that the deepest companion that I had and have was the one who created me, who was guiding me. That's the absolute truth of my story anyways. Whoever I have studied with, it's then that I was alone with God. Now also that I know that is where the guidance is coming from. That is who the guide is. That is what I wish to impart to those who are seeking guidance. It's that the one who created us, the one who created us all, is the one who knows where we're going, for what purpose we were created. And all we have to do sincerely is turn to the source. Turn with all the love in our heart to the one who's giving us that love, the one who's imparting that love to us. And so that's what I learned during those years where I spoke to no one. I spoke to no one. I couldn't speak the language of anyone around wherever I was. And yet, from one vehicle to the next, I was placed in exactly the carrier that I had to be in to go to the next stage of the journey, until I finally began to meet my living sheikhs, my living teachers.
Now, had you made the decision at this time to pursue Islam as your life's path, or were you still seeking?
No. Long before I became a Muslim, I was on this journey being led from one place to the next. And so the book tells all of those different dimensions, but one part of it certainly had to, I passed through Buddhist and Vedantic experience, certainly, which developed the state of the understanding of meditation. And then I was the guru in India, who was Ram Dass's guru, Maharaji. When I finally met him, which was after many, weeks or months of travel, I don't know, where I was just being carried along through these amazing experiences. When I finally came to him, he told me everything that had just happened. He said, I saw you there, and then you went through this. And then finally, he said to me, now you have to go back. He didn't tell me to stay there, but he said, your path is love, and you have to walk in the footsteps of the prophet Jesus, or I think he said, just walk in the footsteps of Jesus. Peace and blessings be upon him. So that's really what he said to me after all those months of search. And I accepted that completely, because I had been seeking knowledge, not a person, not a path, the knowledge that would set me free. And eventually I came back. Very soon after I found my way back to Europe, I was guided to someone who absolutely recognized me in Holland. And I was staying in the house of that person, and I heard music of monks singing in Belgium, and that was the sound that guided me to the next step in my journey. So I immediately wrote a letter to the monastery, and I was invited to come immediately, and so that was the next step. And it's while I was living there that I discovered what it meant to walk in the footsteps of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon him, and how he lived within me and how I was connected. And the walking in the footsteps of Jesus, peace and blessings be upon all the prophets, definitively led me to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him.
While you were in the monastery?
Not yet.
Okay.
But while I was there for a period of time, and for quite a while, and then I went to France, and I met a wonderful Mother Superior, and she took me with her, and I went through that whole process of purification and study, and I would read the Bible, but I would only read certain passages. And then she set me up with someone so I would get catechism, but I was with this illuminated sister who only talked about the light of the Christ. We never talked about any of the other aspects of either the religion or the church. And we used to go to the mountains and talk about Jesus and Rumi. That was my catechism. So, but after absorbing this knowledge, I was in the cell, or one of the places where I was living, and I looked out the window. I saw a man, a woman, and a child, and the message came from God. Okay, you've absorbed the knowledge that you need here, and you are not going to stay here forever. You have to go back and continue your journey, continue to travel. And I connected with my family, who are extremely supportive of me no matter what, and they sent a ticket, and I got onto a plane and they put me in first class. That was the only time that practically in my life, and I was in this heavenly spheres, and it was all singing. It was a beautiful, beautiful invocation of Maryam that was being sung on the plane. And there was just one man there, a very religious, very devout person. There was only him and me on that plane. And we talked all about these mysteries. And then I arrived in California. My stepmother, Sophie, and dad, Lenny, they built a cathedral, practically, room in the house where they wanted me to talk about what happened in the monastery. They came to the monasteries themselves. And they spent a lot of time in the church and everything. It was a Russian Orthodox type of liturgy. And so I came back, and then I was there for a while, and then I got the message. I would always get a message, it's time to move on. And I was actually guided to the Lama Foundation. I was guided to Boulder, Colorado, where there were friends of mine from the past, and then to the Lama Foundation, and I met Sheikh Nuruddin Durki there, and he was heading to Jerusalem with a small group of people. And that was where I was destined to go next, without any doubt, and never was there a doubt. And so we made that journey there, and very soon after, I was guided to my first teacher. And here's how it happened. My Mother Superior appeared on the very day that I did in Jerusalem, and I was living on the Mount of Olives. We were living on the Mount of Olives, all of us, our little community. And so she was going to a course in the Book of Revelation on the Mount of Olives that day. So she and I went to the course. We sat there for a week and absorbed that light of the book, of the transmission from her spiritual father. And a few days later, I was sitting at Damascus Gate praying and waiting for her. And a young man approached me, and his name was Hassan Asharif. That indicates he comes from the family of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he was kind of gazing at me, and I was meditating. Eventually I came out of this state and saw him, and he said, "Aren't you Mary from California?" I said, "Yes, I'm Maryam." I'm Maryam. He said, "My grandfather is waiting for you." And that was my first sheikh. So, he came to visit us where we lived, and then in about a week, I went with Nuruddin, him, and another wonderful person named Abdul Latif to visit the Zawiya of the sheikh. And that was a very sacred and holy experience. And at the end of the gathering, which was invocation, it was zikr. It's when I discovered what zikr was. They were invoking the one most subtle, Ya Latif. And at the end of this beautiful assembly of souls, the gentleman walked out, the brothers walked out, but before I got out, there was a message from an elder disciple, and he said, "The grandfather wants you to move in," and I did, and that's how I came into that phase of great joy, which was becoming Muslim and being embraced by Islam, really understanding that here in the Holy Land, the Jewish girl who had become Christian became Muslim, and that all of these stages of evolution, as you asked about earlier, or as Isa asked about, all of these prophets I experienced by living in the Holy Land and walking where they walked, and and praying where they prayed. I lived on the Mount of Olives where Jesus stayed up through the night. And I walked to Bethany where I worked with handicapped children. So living in that atmosphere, all of this fit together perfectly. And I felt no separation between the prophetic message of one messenger or another, or any part of my being that was so-called Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. But it all came into wholeness, into purity, into perfection, into the natural state. It was perfectly natural for me to become Muslim, and I'm going to explain to you one more thing that happened. The grandfather was 135 years old, they said, and he was a very, very holy and, like outside of the norm type of human being, like radiant. And he was blind. But he took a picture of me. I gave him a picture. And he said, "It's so beautiful, but why is your head not covered?" So you know that he wasn't blind, but he couldn't see it with these earthly eyes.
Right.
Furthermore, everything he said to me was like that. So he said that I should go sleep on a certain place. It was his bed, but he didn't sleep. He was up throughout the night. And he was praying on me and blowing on me, just like I saw when I saw the earlier vision. So he was the first one to manifest what I had already seen, that someone was blowing on me. Well, he was blowing and praying, I know now that's what it was. And I had a dream, and in the dream, I was told I was in a kingdom where there was a war going on between tribes. I now understand, according to my knowledge, that it was the Jews and the Muslims. The Christians were somewhere there too. And the message was, you make a retreat. I've told you already, this is my path is about everything to do with making retreats. So in my dream, before I knew anything, I was told to make a retreat for 40 days. As the prophet Moses did, peace and blessings be upon him. But I went into a cave, and the doors, you don't see anyone while you're in retreat, so I just stayed there and prayed. But every day a rose was sent into the room. Every day a rose came into the room until it was full of roses. Finally, someone came at the end. He said, he's a messenger from the king. And he said, the king is asking for your hand in marriage. In order to fulfill this marriage, you have to jump off a cliff. So I didn't feel any fear about that at all. That sounded perfectly okay to me. Yeah. That made perfect sense to me. And I told it to the grandfather. He said, the king is Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's asking you to unite with him. In order to do that, you have to jump off a cliff. That means let go of everything you thought you knew and bow down in the presence of your Lord and receive what he has to give you. And so then he said, now it's time to make salat. That's how I learned about making the salat where you bow down in the presence of your Lord. And everything about the experience was so uplifting and liberating. So now we understand, seek and the truth shall make you free, that jumping off that cliff and then I said in my book, but I was completely, I jumped off a cliff and God made me fly. And that's what it's been like from that point on. That was in 1974, so it's almost 40 years now that I continue to bow down and be lifted up and be uplifted by the grace of God, meant to fly.
Well, our conversation has been amazing. We're already been going over an hour, and you've just now come to the point where you're talking
It's
about
beginning.
But actually, I think I covered pretty much all the questions I had. But I would like to give you the opportunity in closing to talk a bit about what you're hoping to do now. I know that you have a dream of taking your book and manifesting it as a movie. So just talk a minute about that.
Sure. I wanted to say to begin with, in the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, that it is not a light trust given to us that we are able to speak to the people who are listening to us. It's not a little gift. It's a very, very great honor for me to realize that people are listening to us that may be brought closer to their Lord, to our Lord, to the journey itself. That if anyone hearing this is inspired to travel on the path that leads to realization, to union with the highest realities, then the fact that we have the opportunity to do this is so great for us, and it's such a blessing for us. And in Quran, we're also told that those who teach, as well as those who learn, are greatly, blessed. So it's not that I can tell anyone what they need to do, but just as I was inspired to find the way that was most authentic for myself, I want everyone who hears this and is inspired to seek knowledge that will be liberating to them and will be uplifting. And just observing the world as we have been lately, it seems that if you do watch television, which we do periodically, there's almost nothing positive that is being said. It's very rare. I think one thing I saw was that two young men were in a car and they were able to notice that there was a girl in need of help in the adjoining car, and they were able to call 911 quickly enough to free that woman. That's no little matter. That's a great thing. That was great news. I don't want to say nothing good is happening. That's great. So what we want, though, what we wish to do if we are so blessed to make a movie of the book, is to transmit the light that has been given to those who have been enlightened by God's grace, to penetrate through all of this distortion, injustice, cruelty, chaos. There's just a prevailing chaos, and it's particularly very, very visible on the screens of the world. Call it television, or very often even the movies, which start out to be extremely, hopeful, don't necessarily get to the enlightened end. So based upon the wealth of blessings that have, been bestowed upon myself and others, I would like to, by God's grace alone, embody this truth, embody it in visionary form. In other words, like the way that I'm talking just about a little bit of the journey, to make it visible on a screen. What is it like to travel in the presence of God? What is it like to feel God's grace like lifting you up as you're going through a difficulty? That because the path is not necessarily easy and you have to face these obstacles. So I was in very dangerous situations, but the grace of God just lifted me up and took me right out of that danger. I want to manifest that, and not just a little bit. It has to go all the way. It has to go through doorway after doorway, and then other levels of knowledge are transmitted. Now, this story, it's not important we're not going to say, let's give an Oscar to this person for having an incredible life, you know what I mean? Or for being a really good actress, or for writing a great screenplay. That's not what it's about. We're not looking for fame. I am not looking for fame. I am looking for a transformation across the screens of the world, from darkness to light, from hopelessness to hope. Not hope that's based upon imagination. Hope that is based upon divinely revealed truths that are continuously being revealed. They are being revealed to the hearts of open souls, of seeking souls, of loving, servants of the truth. And so I'm not speaking to myself alone. I'm now singing in a choir. There are many people that are doing this, and nobody even knows that they're doing it. They will understand exactly what I mean. They're already doing it. Now, what we want to do is make a movie that is so relevant, so resonant, so inspiring, that it will touch the hearts of those who have not yet realized what they have to do, how to fulfill the purpose that they came here for. How not only can we do it individually, we can do it collectively. how I go into the prison and see these beautiful women that no one else can see but me right now. How do we encourage them to become freed of that pattern that has been holding them in bondage? And everyone is being held in some kind of bondage until the liberating truth manifests in such a way that they become free. So that's the kind of movie that we want to make if we are so blessed to be guided as we have been in this next phase of the journey. And I encourage everyone who wants to work together with us to join together with us. This is a collective, it's a communal sharing of love and light. And that's what the interview is for. It's to not only now, but in the future, welcome the hearts and souls of the sincere lovers of God to speak up, to communicate, to ask questions or reply to questions, so that with the guidance of God, we as a spiritual community can transform the world in which we actually live, person by person, and in groups of people, to the ultimate degree of possibility before we've actually have our last breath, and we move on to receive all of the responses to our loving, intentions. In other words, whatever we can possibly do while we're living here in this world, let's do that for the sake of God. And I, based on my deep faith, believe that we're achieving the results of this wonderful intention implanted within us by the one of infinite mercy. That there's an endless kind of repercussion to that. In other words, we want to leave a legacy, and by the way, the name of the movie potentially is The Eternal Journey, in search of the forgotten legacy of light. And so I think I'll complete this by saying that from the beginning of time until what goes beyond time, what came before time until what goes beyond time, there is a legacy of light. And because of the nature of human history, very often it's been obscured and covered up. And so ultimately what we actually want to do is to penetrate the veils that are covering over human consciousness until one by one we start remembering what is that legacy of light that God in his infinite grace has created us to know. What does he want us to know about the gift of his love and mercy and light that has so far, even with all the prophets and messengers, not become totally accepted by humankind? What can we do to help us become more conscious servants of that process of illumination and transformation?
Now, if somebody that's watching wants to participate or find out more, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
The website is www.kashmirdream.com. The tariqa that I am a sheikha in is Tariqa Mustafawiya. And my email address, which is very easy, means blessing. So this may be the easiest way to reach me. And I welcome every message from every heart. Barakah, B as in boy, ARAKAH, @verizon.net. And I want to just give abundant love, peace, and blessings to all of you. And I would like to end by invoking the blessings of the Holy Prophet. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin Asabiqul alawami Anwaruhu mila samawati Sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi Adadan rimali wa adadan nujum as-sama. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin Asabiqul alawami Anwaruhu mila samawati Sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi Adadan rimali wa adadan nujum as-sama. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin as-sabiqul alawami anwarahu mila samawati sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi adadan rimali wa adadan nujum as-sama. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace and blessings upon everyone, everywhere. Love to you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. It was fabulous and very inspiring. And in closing then, may all your journeys be truthful till the next time we meet on the Bridge of Truth.